Hello, welcome to this session on qualitative studies. This is Past Appraisal Web Tuition and I am Lena Palaniappan. In this session, I'm going to take you through EMIs and SBAs on qualitative studies. Please note that this material is copyrighted. You cannot copy this material or share it with anyone else without our permission. Please respect our right to be compensated for our time and our efforts. Thank you. In this session, we're going to cover MCQs and EMIs on qualitative studies, long SPAs on Asian Medical Student Survey, which is a question that has been repeated many times in your exams, critical appraisal of qualitative studies, medical student supervision study, and a study on residential alternatives. So these are some of the snapshots of the studies that we are going to look at this session. All of them have appeared in your previous paper B exams. So to prepare for this session, I would like you to go through the lecture video on understanding qualitative research. This is a 20 minutes video. It contains everything that you need to grasp the basic concepts required for this session. Also, please look at the qualitative studies smart revise notes either through the SPMM website or through the Past Appraisal subscription. Okay, let's start with an EMI on qualitative research terminologies. So you have several choices, A to K, each of them describing a terminology, a term that's associated with qualitative research, and you have several descriptive scenarios, and you have to choose one appropriate term for each of the scenario. Question 1. A researcher recognizes her own influence on her research, especially the effect of her gender, ethnic background, and social status on the choices she makes about the methods, data collection, and analysis. What is that? Question 2. Research participants are chosen to represent a range of beliefs and experiences that the researcher believes will be relevant to the research question. What is that called? 3. A researcher feeds back elements of a study to participants to provide them with an opportunity to make judgments on the resonance of those elements with their own experience. Finally, a methodology that uses iterative data collection and analysis to build theories about social phenomena. Okay, so we'll see all of these concepts one by one. First of all, reflexivity. Reflexivity is being sensitive to the ways in which the researcher and the research process have shaped the collected data. So it is just reflecting who are you as a researcher and how is your position as a researcher and your background, for example, your training and your family background, your socioeconomic status, your race, your religion, your attitude towards life in general. How do those things affect the data collection process and the interpretation process? So that's that kind of reflection or critical thinking that is called reflexivity. We also use the term grounded theory in qualitative research. What is that? When you collect data in qualitative research, you collect data through interviews or focus groups. Now, people say very many things during those interviews. How to organize all of those ideas and generate a theory? This is achieved using a grounded theory approach. It's nothing but a constant comparison of the collected data at different stages. By repeatedly comparing, you will generate categories until nothing new is revealed. So that's the point when you reach theoretical saturation or data saturation. Later, you can test categories by collecting fresh data on the basis of the new categories that you made. This is called theoretical sampling. Okay, so keep collecting data and start extracting the categories that emerge from the data. And whenever you get some categories, you go back to the data and get some more new categories. If you keep doing this, if you keep collecting a set of categories, a set of ideas that emerge with respect to the theory that you want to study, at some point you will not get any more new categories emerging. No new theories will emerge. Whatever that has to be said, whatever that people have to say about a particular topic, they would have said everything at some point, and you won't get anything new from the sample that you have. That point is called theoretical saturation. If you want to test whether you have reached theoretical saturation, you can give those categories to a fresh sample of people and find out if they want to add anything to the categories that you have already collected. If you don't get any more new categories, then you can confirm that you have reached theoretical saturation. So the type of sampling for new theoretical categories is called theoretical sampling. You do that after you reach the point of theoretical saturation. So this whole process of going back and back and forth to generate new categories from the data that's collected, this is called grounded theory approach. It's an iterative approach, cyclical approach. What is member checking? Member checking is also called respondent validation or informant feedback. What is this? Once you generate an account of what you think the participants have told, the investigator's account, your own account, is compared with the account that research subjects hold about the topic that you are studying. So from the data that you collect, you generate theories, and then you take the theories back to the same people who gave the original data, and you check with them if this is what they said. So to put it in simple terms, you have a set of people who say something, you make some notes and you consolidate what they say, and then what you do, you go back to the same people and ask them, is this what you really said? That's called member checking, and this is respondent validation. It's also called respondent validation. Finally, purposive sampling. What is purposive sampling? This is very commonly used in qualitative studies. It's also called judgmental sampling or subjective sampling. So you choose people based on a prior judgment. This is a non-random technique. This is used to focus on the characteristics of interest, and this is only used in qualitative research. There are various types of purposive sampling. You can select the deviant cases, people that are outliers. You can select cases with maximum variation. You can also define and select critical cases that are important for your study. So each individual is different, but you can pick the ones that you want to study if you use purposive sampling. Okay, so with all that background, we can now answer the questions here. Question 1, a researcher recognizes her own influence on her research. So this is reflexivity. 2. Research participants are chosen to represent a range of beliefs and experiences which the researcher believes to be relevant. This is purposive sampling. 3rd, a researcher feeds back elements of study to participants to provide them with the opportunity to make judgments on the resonance. This is member validation. 4th one, a methodology that uses iterative data collection to build theories about social phenomena. This is grounded theory approach. Okay, now we're going to see a question on addictions and sexually transmitted diseases. As a specialty doctor in an addiction clinic, you are concerned that the increase in the rate of sexually transmitted diseases in your area may be linked to the high rates of methamphetamine use locally. You conduct a qualitative study initially by interviewing several patients, and you devise an educational intervention called FATA, Focused Addiction Therapist Advice. To test the effectiveness of this intervention, you decided to provide FATA to alternating patients attending your clinic. Using this information, answer the following questions. What is the most appropriate study design to investigate the relationship between methamphetamine use and the rate of STDs? Focus group, meta-analysis, semi-structured interview, observational survey, randomized control trial. To investigate the association between two phenomena, an observational study measuring incidence rates of the co-occurrence of both problems, that is, STDs and methamphetamine use, is a good starting point. To establish causality that STDs are caused by increased methamphetamine use, this won't be sufficient. A cohort study may be more appropriate. You may have to do a cohort study to establish causality. So the most appropriate design to investigate the relationship is observational cross-sectional survey. First of all, you have to see if there is any co-occurrence, investigating the relationship. If you want to look at the causal relationship, you do a cohort study. Okay. So to test your hunch that FATA is an effective intervention, what study design have you used in the above scenario? So in the scenario depicted, what study design has been used to evaluate the effectiveness of FATA? Control trial, cohort study, RCT, case control, qualitative study. To test the effectiveness of the intervention, you decided to provide FATA to alternating patients attending your clinic. So one patient gets the treatment, the other patient doesn't. You are testing an intervention, so you are effectively conducting a trial. You have some controls for whom the active intervention is not being offered. You are alternating patients who do not receive FATA. So you are running a controlled trial. So you are running a controlled trial in your clinic. It's not randomized, but it is still a controlled trial. What is the desired primary outcome of the study that investigates the effect of the education intervention? The degree of patients' understanding of methamphetamine and STD's relationship, incidence of STD, prevalence of STD, abstinence rates of methamphetamine, societal cost of STDs. Whichever one are you really targeting as the primary outcome? It is the primary concern is the incidence of STDs. That's why you're doing this intervention. The educational intervention, by reducing risky sexual habits, aims to reduce the incidence of STDs. An increase in patients' understanding of the relationship is a proxy endpoint. The patient understands the relationship better between drugs and STD. So this is a proxy endpoint. Okay, so question number, for this question, the choice A is the right answer. The degree of patient's understanding of methamphetamine and STD relationship. That's what you want to improve by offering this intervention. For the qualitative study described above, what is the best method for sampling? Focus group, consecutive sampling, snowball sampling, random sampling, bootstrapping. So for the qualitative study, focus group is not a sampling method. Due to the difficulty in reaching the group of people with drug use, with STD as well, snowball sampling may be more useful here. Okay, so for qualitative study described here, the best method of sampling is snowball sampling. For the qualitative study described above, what is the best method of collecting data? Data collection. Online survey, snowballing, structured interview, observational analysis, focus groups. What are focus groups? Focus groups are comprised of interviews in a group format with predetermined structure. They are useful when limited resources prevent individual interviews. They can be used when studied individuals share something in common, health experience in common. Members must usually be around 6 to 10. If you have more than 10 members, that's not going to be very useful. If you have less than 6 members, they may not interact enough to give you the range of opinions you need. It's not a good idea to have just one group for the whole research. Have more than one focus group. Many small groups must be included in the research. So for the qualitative study described above, the best method of data collection is focus groups. Okay, so the next question is a very important question. This is a college favorite. It has appeared at least 2 times in your previous exams, especially in the recent exams. So this is a paper published in the BMJ by Wolf and others. It's a paper on ethnic stereotypes and underachievements of UK medical students from ethnic minorities. In your exam, they gave you a very large paragraph split into sections, methods and results from this paper, followed by questions. First question, what type of study has been conducted? By looking at the paragraph, you'll be able to answer this question. This is a straightforward question. So you will see in the methods that they are using a semi-structured interview, one-to-one interview, and also focus groups. So that's a useful clue for you to know what kind of study has been conducted. This is a qualitative study. What type of sampling has been used? Random, convenience, volunteer, purposive, snowball. So in the methods, the description says that 27 year 3 medical students and 25 clinical teachers at a London medical school are selected for required ethnicity and sex. So they are purposefully selected. So this is called purposive sampling. It's also called judgmental or subjective sampling. It's a non-random technique. So that's what has been used here in the study, purposive sampling. The aims of the study is to establish the degree of racial discrimination in the UK medical schools, to explore ethnic stereotypes of UK medical students, to explore the causes of underachievement of medical students from ethnic minority, to explore the quality of teacher-student relationship in UK medical schools, to characterize the qualities of Asian medical students. So what do you think is the aim of the study? Ethnic stereotypes of UK medical students were explored in the context of academic underachievement of medical students from ethnic minorities. So the main aim is to explore the ethnic stereotypes of UK medical students. Which of the following can be considered as an inherent problem in the study? Generalizability, sampling bias, exclusion bias, lack of randomization, measurement bias. So remember, all qualitative studies suffer from limitation of generalizability. A qualitative study generates a hypothesis, it does not test it. It's an inductive approach where uh, you don't find answers for a specific question. Instead, you try to form broad ideas about a phenomena. Results are not generalizable to a large population. And you do purposeful or purposive sampling, you don't do random sampling. So your sample will not be representative of the whole population. So you cannot extrapolate data from the sample to the entire population. Which of the following can be considered inherent problem of the study? Generalizability. To achieve triangulation, which of the following has been carried out in the study? Both students and teachers were interviewed. Both whites and Asians were included. Both females and males were studied. The investigator was kept blind from studies from students' ethnicity. The students were kept blind from investigators' ethnicity. So how did the authors achieve triangulation? Students and teachers had concordant and well-developed perceptions of who is a typical Asian clinical medical student. So triangulation has been, what is triangulation? Triangulation is comparing the results from either two or more different methods of data collection or two or more data sources. Such kind of comparison, triangulative comparison, is important for establishing validity of the research design, qualitative research. So here what the authors have done, they have done one-to-one interviews with teachers separately from students, and they're checking the notes finally to see if same categories are emerging from both sources of data. Both students and teachers being interviewed is a method for triangulation. The sex, ethnicity and age of the interviewer, British, female, white, may have affected participants' discussion of certain topics. This awareness is called reflexivity, resonance, member checking, research insight, metacognition. So this is called reflexivity, and we have already seen what reflexivity stands for. It's considering one's own position in the broader outputs of a research study. So the answer is reflexivity. A constant comparative approach has been used for data analysis. One of the advantages of this approach is that it was possible to meaningfully organize the data. Small sample size was sufficient. Study became more cost effective. Emerging categories were refined in a flexible manner. Confirmatory hypotheses were tested. Okay, so which one of the following is right? The advantage, we know what grounded theory is. It's constant comparison of collected data at different stages. So you take the data, you grind it, develop categories, you go back to the sources of data and you grind the data this way repeatedly until you get what you want, all of the different categories of opinions around a topic that you are studying. So the emerging categories being refined in a flexible manner. That's the advantage of constant comparative method. The conclusions of the study are: student-teacher relationship is not important in determining quality of learning. Students believed that to foster relationship, it was important to find out about teachers' individual educational capabilities. Typical white student stereotype does not exist in medical schools. Typical Asian student stereotypes are well formed. Asian medical students may show significant underachievement in London Medical School. Students and teachers had concordant and well-developed perception of the typical Asian medical student. Stereotypes of the typical white student were less well-developed. Nevertheless, they were present, but they were less well-developed. This investigation suggested that the Asian clinical medical students may be more likely than white students to be perceived stereotypically. So, the typical Asian student stereotypes are well-formed. That's an important conclusion of the study. The next question is adapted from a medical education paper, Exploring Factors Affecting Undergraduate Medical Students' Study Strategies in Clinical Years, a qualitative study. So they give you a large paragraph followed by a little flow chart. In the flow chart, you can see factors affecting student study strategies. They are doing a teacher's interviews and student interviews. And there are 13 semi-structured individual interviews for teachers and 7 semi-structured group interviews for students. And in round 2, they are repeating the 13 semi-structured individual interviews for teachers, and they are having 12 semi-structured individual interviews for students. What type of study is this? So this is a phenomenological study according to the description. Semi-structured focus group interviews were done. So the term phenomenological study suggests it's a qualitative data, it's qualitative study. Other pointers in the PRESI include triangulation, focus groups, open-ended questions, and semi-structured interviews. Putting it all together, you're doing a qualitative research. What's the major weakness in the study? Including only those students in the clinical years, restricting data collection to one calendar year, using the same sample for both round 1 and round 2, using small sample, using open-ended questions. So in the method section, they have given that for the triangulation of data, the authors conducted a second set of interviews with all of the 13 clinical teachers and 12 of the students who had participated in the focus groups. Using the same student sample for both round 1 and round 2 interviews, this has reduced the usefulness of the approach. If you have interviewed different set of students, you could have tested if the same categories emerge again. So that opportunity has been missed here. It's one of the weaknesses of the study. Sample size does not create any issues with qualitative research as long as you use a grounded theory approach. So identify one strength of the study using computerized random sampling, size of recruited sample, using same interviewer for all interviews, using quotations to identify major themes and sub-themes, using a computer software for the analysis. All interviews were transcribed verbatim, and themes and sub-themes relevant to the research questions were assigned and representing codes were selected. So using the codes, verbatim reports, this is a specific strength. This helps to preserve the original opinions without distorting them during the analytical process. Identify one strength of the study. So the answer is using quotations to identify major themes and sub-themes. Okay. In this session, let's see an EMI on sampling techniques for qualitative research. A researcher wants to explore service users' perception and attitudes associated with prescription and administration of clozapine in community mental health settings. He chooses to use one of the following sampling methods. Choose the correct term describing each approach from the list below. So you have multiple types of sampling described between choices A and H: concordant, convenience, intensity sampling, multi-stage sampling, purposive, random, snowballing, and systematic sampling. Let's see the questions here. First question: the researcher chooses to offer a semi-structured interview to the patients who attend clozapine monitoring clinic once every 3 months. All active community clozapine users are registered to attend this clinic. Second question: the researcher pursues a set of service users who experienced an unusual increase in sweating with clozapine. Another service user who shared the same effect introduced these patients to the researcher. 3. The researcher specifically attempts to include some highly satisfied service users, some poorly compliant users, and some users who discontinued early in the course, and some users who continue to have psychotic symptoms despite high degree of concordance. 4. The researcher recruits 4 service user experts who have wide experience of talking to clozapine users in their locality. Let's see different types of sampling that are relevant here. Number 1 is convenience or opportunistic sampling. This is a technique that uses an open period of recruitment that continues until a set of subjects or institutions are enrolled. Here, the selection is based on first come first served basis. So you have a distributed sample, you select a group of sample that is convenient to you. Okay, so in this instance, you are finding patients with high degree of sweating, and this person acts as a hub for further recruitment. So first thing that you do is find one person, and then that person finds another person, and he finds another one, and he finds another one, so on and so forth, he or she. So this is a snowball sampling. This is useful to recruit for research studies when dealing with social or legally sensitive issues. So you know what is purposive sampling? This is also called judgmental or subjective sampling. You choose the outliers, deviant cases, or cases with maximum variation, or critical cases that are important for your research question. Now, intensity sampling is a variant of purposive sampling. Here, a subject who is expert in the topic of study, he or she serves to provide expert information on the specialist topic. It's also called key informant approach or intensity sampling. There is less emphasis on deviance or outliers. Instead, there is more emphasis on being information rich or vocal. So if you select people who are vocal or who are information rich to get the data that you want, this is called intensity sampling. Okay, so now let's see the answers for these questions. Question 1. Researcher chooses to offer a semi-structured interview to the patients who attend clozapine monitoring clinic once every 3 months. All active community clozapine users are registered to attend this clinic. So this is convenient sampling. Whoever is registered in your clinic, whoever is active whoever is an active clozapine user, you are registering all of them. Whoever comes to your clinic every 3 months, you are registering all of them. So this is convenient sample. The researcher pursues a set of service users who experienced an unusual increase in sweating. Another service user shared the same effect, introduced these patients to the researcher. So the recruitment is done by using one service user as a hub who connects you with remaining service users. So this is called snowball sampling. Researcher specifically attempts to include some highly satisfied service users, some poorly compliant ones, some discontinuous, early discontinuous, and some who continue despite having significant resistance symptoms. So you are recruiting deviant cases, so this is called purposive sampling. Finally, you recruit 4 service user experts who have wide experience of talking to other users in the locality. This is intensity sampling. So this is a qualitative research study on service users' experience of residential alternatives to standard acute wards. This paper was published in 2010 in British Journal of Psychiatry. In your exam, they gave you a summary of this paper. To explore patient subjective experiences of traditional hospital services and residential alternatives to hospital, in-depth interviews were conducted with 40 carefully selected patients in residential alternative services who had previously experienced hospital inpatient stays. Eligible patients were identified by staff and were interviewed in depth by a single researcher for up to 2 hours duration using a topic guide. The in-depth interviews were audio taped and transcribed and analyzed using thematic analysis. Initially, 4 interviews were independently coded, and an open coding session between 4 researchers was used to confer on and list themes. Findings and emerging themes were tested for validity through discussion in both one-to-one and group meetings by an interdisciplinary team comprising researchers with psychiatric, psychological, and social work backgrounds, both with and without clinical experience and experience of using mental health services. Patients reported overall preference for residential alternatives. These were identified as treating patients with lower levels of disturbance, being safer, having more freedom and decreased coercion, and having less paternalistic staff compared with traditional inpatient services. However, patients identified no substantial difference between the relationship with staff overall and the care provided between the 2 types of services. So, which one of the following can be considered a strength of the study? Avoiding inter-rater variability by using single interviewer, choosing patients with a shared experience of hospital inpatient stay, representativeness of the sample, use of interdisciplinary approach to validate emerging themes, using 2 hours long interviews. So findings and emerging themes were tested for validity through discussion in both one-to-one and group meetings by an interdisciplinary team. This is an important strength. The use of multiple coders for validating emerging themes has provided a mode of triangulation that increases the validity of the reported study. The use of an interdisciplinary approach to validate emerging themes. This is a specific strength of the study. Which of the following can be considered as a weakness of the study? Choosing patients with a shared experience of hospital inpatient stay, recruiting a non-random sample, use of interdisciplinary approach to validate emerging themes, using 2 hours long interviews, using a single interviewer for all interviews. Eligible patients were identified by staff and were interviewed in depth with us by a single researcher. Using a single interviewer could have affected the relevant experiences reported by the interviewed subjects. any idiosyncrasies of this interviewer might have affected all the results, all the data given by the patients. So that's a weakness. Using a single interviewer for all interviews is a weakness of the study. What type of sampling has been used by the researchers? Biased sampling, deviant sampling, purposive sampling, quota sampling, systematic sampling. So what have they done? Eligible patients were identified by staff and were interviewed in depth by a single researcher. So identification was done by the staff based on the characteristics that you were looking for. So this is purposive sampling. Which of the following biases are likely in the study? Attrition bias, recall bias, misclassification bias and attrition bias, moderator bias and attrition bias, moderator bias and lead time bias, moderator bias and recall bias. 40 carefully selected patients in residential alternative services who had previously experienced hospital inpatient stays. So these patients have had prior experience in the inpatient units. So you're asking them to recall those experiences. Patients in this study were not interviewed at the time of inpatient stay. Instead, they were approached after moving to the alternative units of stay. The retrospective recollection of patients' experience may be subject to recall bias and other time-dependent influences. So that's a problem. What is moderator bias? In qualitative research, a focus group moderator or one-to-one interviewer can have non-verbal or verbal attitudes, expressions, body language, approach, etc. that could interfere with the way the data is obtained, that could introduce a bias. Similarly, moderators' demographics such as age, gender, social status, race, and accent can also affect the interview content. All of this is called moderator bias. So the following biases are likely in the study. What are they? Moderator bias and recall bias. Why did the authors choose selected patients to participate in the study? To enable open flow of information, to improve the power of the study, to increase representativeness of the results, to maximize likelihood of obtaining a complete range of views, to reduce sample size to a manageable level. So the main reason to choose purposive sampling is to maximize the chance of obtaining a range of views relevant for the qualitative study. Okay, the answer is D. Which type of interview has been used in this study? Close questioning, focus group, semi-structured, unstructured, structured. So the answer is the researcher has been interviewing all the eligible subjects for up to 2 hours using a topic guide. So whenever you see the use of topic guides is playing up, then this is semi-structured approach, semi-structured interview. Time limited and topic guided interview. So this is semi-structured. Thank you for choosing to revise with Pass Appraisal course.